just look at what are biosimilars in a very simple manner. So biosimilars, genetically occur from living organisms versus a clinical process, which is the part of a normal ANDA. Biosimilars are absolutely a similar version of the original product that has come in, and you get a FDA approval only if they are absolutely similar in terms of what is the sort of target area that this biosimilar is looking at, and what is the sort of effectiveness of this biosimilar. As of now, it's been the theme in the US FDA or by the US FDA. Till now, only 6 to 7 biogenerics have been approved. However, biologics, which is the innovator market, seems to be very, very strong. Now, let's just look at a basic difference between a generic as well as a biosimilar. So the process for biosimilar, very, very complex. For generics, it's comparatively very, very simple. The size is large molecule, mainly for biosimilars. For generics, you're looking at that. Small molecules. Origin comes in from living cells for biosimilars. For the generics, it comes in from synthesized products, and compositions are active ingredients identical to the innovative products. However, for biosimilars, it's not particularly very, very identical. In the last 1 year, a company like Biocon, which has got a few approvals, has given a fantastic return. Over the last 3 years, their returns are even much more. Most of the companies have just recently started to invest into biosimilars versus their earlier generic products. And if you look at the new FDA commissioner and the statement coming in from him, they are looking in at reducing cost by more approvals in biogeneric space. They are also looking in at much more effective results as more and more biosimilars gets approved. So that's what the US FDA commissioner has said. And after that, the overall interest by investors, by countries, by companies into biosimilars has been very, very strong.
Okay, Pankaj, thanks much for really highlighting what a biosimilar is and why it's so important to be tracking this space. Devin Ghosh, the founder and president at Epigen Biotech, joins us on the show right now. Devin, thanks for joining in today on this intriguing subject. The world took notice of biosimilars when Biocon got that approval, and just everyone was like, what's a biosimilar? So really, the first basic question, what is a biosimilar and why is it so important?
Yeah, okay. So to understand what is biosimilars, first of all, I'd like to explain what are the biological molecules, okay? Sure. Vis-a-vis the chemical drugs, okay? Now, the first starting point is 75% of the drugs worldwide, the pipeline drugs, are going to be biotech drugs. Now, why is it so? Which is a huge number, okay? We're talking about $1 trillion of pharmaceuticals, and 75% of the pipeline drugs going to be biological drugs. And what does it mean? Now, the fundamental difference between chemical drugs and biological drugs is chemical drugs are smaller molecules usually, and biological drugs are larger molecules. Now, biological drugs are produced microbially by either microbial cultures or animal cell cultures. Okay, so these are all proteins. All these are protein drugs called therapeutic proteins. This is biopharmaceuticals. So the fundamental difference is chemical drugs you synthesize chemically in your plant using a reactor where you put some chemicals like sodium chloride and sulfur and so on and so forth. Then you make a chemical which becomes a chemical drug, which are usually the molecular weight of that would not be more than 15, 20 daltons, 100 daltons. But when we're talking biological drugs, these are much larger. So we're talking about 100,000 daltons, and these are all produced biologically by microorganisms. Okay. So the fundamental difference is, chemical drugs, they're not smart enough. They are like the chemicals, if you make A and B, it will produce C. But when you're talking biologicals, A and B can make C, can make C1, C2, C3, depending on what is needed.
How large is the entire biosimilar opportunity in the world?
The biosimilar, biopharmaceutical is right now, as we speak, we are talking about 2020, $250 billion of biologicals, biopharmaceuticals.
It's not large. If I look at the generic and if I look at the entire chemistry.
$250 billion?
$250 billion.
$250 billion is a lot, because right now we are talking about $1 trillion of pharmaceutical, and we are talking $250 billion of biopharmaceutical right now, which is, I would say, is quite a big number. But the best part is, right now we are talking about only 10% of that is coming from biosimilars. You see, but then by 2020, that's going to be like $30 billion or $50 billion. And then the assumption is that by 2030, the numbers can catapult to $100 billion. And where are these numbers coming from? As I said, if you look at the last few years, I don't know whether I'm facing camera properly.
No.
But okay. Yeah. But if you look at the last few years of, for example, the United States, okay, if you look at 2010 to 2015, there is a huge jump in new biological molecules that are being launched. So the biologicals are going to take over the entire pharmaceutical field. So as I said, 75% of the pharmaceuticals are going to be biological drugs. But in the process, many of these novel biological molecules are going to go off patent, okay, in the process. And that's been happening already. Because if you look at in Europe, for example, which is like 25% of the biopharmaceutical market, already 40% biosimilars have entered there. Okay, and in Japan, so on and so forth. Right. However, United States had been very cautious, and they were not allowing the biosimilars to come in because they were like 50% of the biopharmaceutical market, right, of the $250 billion. Okay, so which is we are talking. So, but then, you know, as the new policies in the United States, more effective health care, Obamacare being kind of completely revoked, and so on and so forth.
Are these drugs, or is this synthesis of chemistry more effective, both in terms of the result, and are they also more cost effective?
Absolutely. See, the two very important things in biosimilars, okay, vis-a-vis the chemical drugs, okay. Just take an example of, you know, oncology, okay, which is one of the large areas of biosimilar drugs. Cancer research.
Dumb it down for obvious.
Yeah, okay, for the cancer research, okay. See, the cancer drugs, we usually know chemical drugs are chemotherapy drugs. Which are, what are chemotherapy? Those are cytotoxins. Those are chemicals which are targeted to attack whatever cells proliferate faster in the human body. Okay. Now, the cancer cells are supposed to proliferate faster. Okay. So the cancer cells actually are the ones which proliferate the fastest in the human body. But at the same time, there are other cells like the hair cells, the mouth cells, and also the blood cells in the bone marrow. They also proliferate very fast. So the oncology chemotherapy drugs, the smaller molecules, they cannot differentiate. They go attacking along parallelly with the cancer cells. They also go on attacking the non-cancer cells like the mouth cells and the the blood cells. However, when we're talking about biological molecules, for example, the monoclonal antibodies, these are the biological oncology molecules. What are these? Monoclonal antibodies? These are like heat-seeking missiles. You can program it to look for a certain oncocell from amongst millions of other cells. Okay, right. So we're talking about billions of other cells, and then this monoclonal antibody, which is like a Y, goes on and latches on to the oncocell, and then you can actually attach payloads like you attach on missiles, and then boom, it goes. And it blasts.
So just in terms of cost, I understand that the R&D cost would be way higher because this is a very niche segment that we're talking about. But once these drugs do hit the market and the 20% in the US market grows larger, would chemical drugs be more expensive, or would it be these biotechnology-driven drugs which would be more expensive?
See, as the biosimilars take over, okay, there are going to be a huge impact on the cost of or you can say critical ailments in terms of, for example, oncology or immune disorders or even diabetes for that matter. Okay. Now the biosimilar is going to break down the price barriers, which is already broken down. The myth was it will not come down below more than 20%. But right now we are seeing more than 60% erosion of the cost in terms of the biopharmaceuticals coming from biosimilars. So it's never going to be on the same range as the chemical drugs, the generic drugs.
Will be more expensive.
It will always be much more expensive because there are ailments which these drugs treat or target, which the chemical drugs can never do. We are talking about
which Indian company do you think will make it to the cut? Because when it comes to the chemistry or the generic opportunity, all of them tried, but very few have really managed to scale up. And now when the tide is reversing, all of them are struggling.
It's a very good question, because what happens is this segment is very cryptic.
The generic opportunity, all of them tried, but very few have really managed to scale up. And now when the tide is reversing, all of them are struggling.
It's a very good question, because what happens is this segment is very cryptic. It's not a chemical that you could just manufacture in your reactor. This is a very complex system. First of all, the original molecule itself is very complex. And then you're actually getting your, plasmid, your clone, and then putting in a vector, and then expressing it in E. coli or some Chinese hamster ovaries, and then you've got to make the molecule exactly same as the original molecule, and that depends on the mood of the, organism for that matter. The same organism, if it's in to put it in a simple way, it doesn't have to produce the same stuff every time. Right. Depends on its mood and how it feels, and so on and so forth. So even after making a expression of this biological molecule, you'll have to still go for a phase 3, phase 1 clinical trial, which is not the case for generic drugs. For generic drug, the cost is low because you can produce it and then show the comparisons, chemically using the various chemical processes, not more than 3 or 4 chemical comparisons, and then you're good to go. Whereas in biological molecules, for example, the basic tests are like 48 to 50.
So just coming back to what Nikunj was trying to ask, so far we only have Biocon, which has got the approval. Which other Indian companies do you think are poised to get into biosimilars and get a success of it?
Yes, as I was telling Nikunj right now, it's a very good question because, who are if you look at who are the people who has come into biosimilars and who are the people who are going to come into biosimilars? The two kinds. One are those big pharma guys who see that the biosimilar is exciting, the numbers are really looking very good, so they kind of try to get into here and jump into this and try to set up their biotech facilities and get in the biotech guys. And then you have these companies like Biocons, and even like for that matter, like Epigen, like us, we are biotech companies. We had been always doing only biologicals. We had been producing, biological proteins, recombinant proteins, purifying them. We had never been doing chemicals. Biocon was never doing any chemicals. We were also never doing any chemicals. So we understand this field very well because from our background, we had been always doing biologicals. So for us, it's easier in companies like this who are coming from biological background, like Amgen, world's largest biotech company is Amgen, who's basically they never made chemical drugs, okay? So that's where, you have the connection coming from a biological background, coming into this biopharmaceutical and finally into the biosimilars. Because now India, we're talking about a huge opportunity. We're talking about a $60 billion opportunity in 5 years' time, which is huge. Like what IT has done to Indian economy in the last 2 decades, the biosimilar is capable to do similar stuff for the Indian economy. And the opportunity has already arrived, and the question of just grabbing the opportunity.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Appreciate your time. Thank you for your wonderful insights. That's it.